part of the Workwell community. We've got the Workwell podcast, which our guest Malie has been on in the past. We have blogs, we have a private forum, and we have an online education hub called the Workwell Institute. And actually, Malie has a brand new course on the Workwell Institute. So if you hang on till the end of our session today, we can tell you all about that. Now, all of the Workwell resources are curated through our free weekly newsletter. So if you go to workwellireland.ie, you can sign up to the mailing list for free. Now, so to introduce our guest today, doesn't really need an introduction, but I will give the formal introduction anyway. So Dr. Malie Coyne is a clinical psychologist, a best-selling author, and an adjunct psychology lecturer at NUIG. Malie also sits on the mental health advisory panel for the A Lust for Life charity. Malie has featured in a number of TV programs and is a regular contributor on radio and in print. And as we've just been hearing, Malie lives in Galway with her husband and two little ladies. Well, Malie, I'm exhausted just reading that bio out. So how are you getting on?
Good. Very good. I'm delighted to be here, Brian. It's absolutely brilliant to connect with you live. We've connected so many times, kind of not live. So it's really nice to do it in this way today. Yeah.
Absolutely. And just thanks to everyone for confirming that they can hear us and see us as well. So just a little bit about our session today. Malie, you're going to give us a presentation and introduce the presentation to us. I think the theme for today is kind of compassionate self-care for working parents. So really interesting topic. So you're going to kind of present a bit on that. Then it's over to ourselves. It's over to the audience, really, isn't it? We'll have a discussion. We'll have a Q&A. So all through the session, I'll keep an eye on the comments and the chat. Again, whatever platform you're using, use that and drop a comment in and we'll be able to see it and I can put it to Malie then. So we'll try and keep this as interactive as possible. So Malie, if you're ready to go, we'll kick off.
Great, Brian. I'm going to do a couple of slides, guys, and they're mostly pictures. So we'll get through them pretty quick and then I'll have a chat with Brian after that. So I'm just going to share them now. And I just want to go from the very beginning.
Yeah, take your time. I haven't shared the slides yet, so.
Okay, got it.
There we go. Yeah, lovely.
Yeah, great stuff. So, so thanks so much, guys, for everybody for coming to this Workwell Live webinar. I think this topic is, myself and Brian first did a podcast on this about 2 years ago when we were, can you believe that? A year and a half ago when we were in the middle of the first lockdown. And it became obviously like quite a relevant topic. Suddenly parents were working at home and a lot of them still are. And then we had our children home from school as well. So I think never have we been faced with such a challenge of trying to, previously we could have the boundary because our location of work was somewhere different for many of us. But this created a new challenge. And I know that now we're in a kind of more in between hybrid working space, which may well continue. And there are many advantages to that. But obviously, it's very important for us to know there are disadvantages and there are challenges involved as well. So I think it's important for us to understand our tricky brains, and we all have tricky brains. So our minds, brains, and bodies have evolved over millions of years. And much of what goes on in our mind is not actually of our design or of our choosing. So we have these painful emotions, negative self-talk, and they're there to protect us, but they're difficult to manage. So I suppose most of the problems we have, either in our workplaces or at home, arise because our body and mind is exposed to real or imagined threat. And our brains react in the same way to whether a threat is real or whether it's imagined. And that's the way our brains work. And I think this is a really important quote. We are designed for survival, not happiness. So in a way, when we go searching for happiness, this elusive idea of, oh, we need to be happy. Well, I much prefer the word content because it kind of talks more about a moment in time, and that really our brains are designed to keep us safe and not necessarily for happiness. And we kind of have to work on the happiness aspect and the kind of more positive aspect deliberately ourselves, because our brains are kind of working against us in a way. So we have internal threats, which are the old brain versus the new brain. So as I said, the brain is tricky and hard to manage. Animals don't worry about the past or the future, whereas we do. Animals don't worry about their self-image, getting older, or what they lack. They don't judge or criticize their own natural responses as we do. So not only do we have these natural responses where we get angry and we feel ashamed and we feel jealous and we feel, all these kind of negative emotions, we kind of blame ourselves for having them without realizing that we have a tricky brain and it's natural the way our brain reacts to situations. That's not to say we don't have a choice in how we react. Of course, we have a choice, but we need awareness first. So I call it the perfect storm, the world we live in at the moment, where we have modern life meets our tricky brain. And what is in modern life? We have scarcity culture, this whole idea of we want more, we're looking for more, we're pressured to have more. And then we've the negativity bias, which is basically, I wrote a little book with Brezzi and Susan Quirk a few years ago with A Lust for Life, and it was called The Little Book of Sound. And really what it said was that for every negative thought we have, we need 5 positives to counterbalance it, because we have so many negative thoughts. So if 99% of people say you've done a great job and one person says you haven't done a good job, you're going to focus on the one person who said you didn't do a good job. And that's because our brain is attuned to threat in order to keep us safe. And then we all have social comparison, where we compare ourselves to others. That's very normal. And I think if we try to fight against it, it can lead us to a lot of trouble. For us to just accept that we compare ourselves to others, I think it'll make it a lot easier for us. So I talk in the course that I do for the Workwell Institute about our core values, and that it's important, if we closely align our activities and goals with the things we most value, we will find balance. So it's about trying to figure out what are our core values in the first place. And so if we don't align our goals or how we behave with our core values, we will feel wrong, unbalanced, and unhappy. But if we do align them, we feel more satisfied, content, and healthier. And that's why when I work with clients, often I do an exercise on core values to figure out, like, how are their values unique to them, and how do they tell the story of their lives? And are they actually spending time kind of in pursuit of those values? So if your value is family and you don't spend any time with your family, then you are going to feel wrong, unbalanced, and unhappy. If your value is creativity and you don't get to do anything and you feel very constrained in your life, then that's going to lead to issues. Whereas the opposite is true. If you're actually doing things or even begin to do things that serve your values, you will feel more balanced. The secret to achieving inner peace lies in understanding our inner core values, those things in our lives that are most important to us, and then seeing that they are reflected in the daily events of our lives. So this 3 systems model, and I can talk to you about this after, Brian, it comes from compassion focused therapy. And really, it says that we have 3 emotional regulation systems, and the red one below is called the threat system, which is all about detecting threat and our fight or flight system. And it's responsible for the usual kind of negative emotions that we might have. It keeps us safe if a car is about to run us over. It keeps us safe when, it's responsible for that negative voice inside our heads as well. And we need that threat system to be there. We also have a drive system, which is what gets us up in the morning. Brian, if you and I didn't have a drive system, we wouldn't be doing this today.
Sure.
So it's all about wanting, pursuing, achieving, motivating us towards resources. And then we have a soothing system, which is our green circle, which is about managing the stress and promoting bonding. It's about feeling safe. It's about oxytocin, those first lovely hormones you feel when you're born or you get a hug. So really, I suppose what happens in many work situations is that these 3 systems feed into each other as well. So sometimes we talk, and I'll talk to you in a little while about the stress documentary I was part of, where Sometimes we can become toxically driven, where we're driven, but it comes from a place of threat. So we're kind of doing, but it comes from this place of not feeling good enough, rather than coming from our soothing circle, which is more like doing something because you enjoy doing it, like what we're doing today. I think we're driven today from a place of soothing, but we're not doing this today because we feel threatened that something's going to happen if we don't, or we feel threatened that we're not good enough, So it's about, so like self-care, people sometimes think, oh, it's all about laziness and feeding your soothing circle, but then suddenly you become lazy. That's not at all the case. If you look at this 3 systems model, it brings the science into why it's important for us to feed our soothing circles, if you're a parent or if you're not a parent. So what can we do to feel centered? When our threat, drive, and safe systems work well together, our soothing system, we feel centered. We can develop skills to turn threat off and soothing on. Self-compassion triggers activity in our soothing brain, which soothes our threat response, reduces anxiety, and restores emotional balance. So what we're trying to do is cultivate our soothing brain. And by doing that, we actually increase our resilience and the potential to thrive at home and also in our workplace. So again, this comes from a brilliant article that I can send you a link to, actually, Brian. It's the VUCA article, which I have in the course, but it's excellent. And it kind of talks about why it's so important to know about these 3 circles in our work environments, and how we can even, how leaders can help employees, how employees, parents can help themselves to recognize the different situations they might find themselves in work and where this toxic drive comes from. So we're looking for healthy drive, which is all about adventure, challenge, energy, enthusiasm, and value aligned. And if we're in threat mode, we'll kind of go more towards burnout, stress, exhaustion, that kind of thing.
We can include the link to that article in the mail that goes out with the replay.
Absolutely. It's on PDF, so it totally, you can get a link to that. And if there's any other links that I think are relevant, I'll send them to you as well.
Great stuff.
So the 3 elements of self-compassion, the most important things to know about them is mindfulness. We've heard about this millions of times. Really, mindfulness is about awareness of how we're feeling and our thinking without judging ourselves for that. So if you're feeling ashamed, without judging, oh, why am I feeling this way? It's just awareness. That's what mindfulness really is at its core. Then self-kindness is about being kind to ourselves as we become aware of how we're feeling, and not to over criticize ourselves. And then connectedness is this idea of common humanity, where we remember that everybody feels the way we do sometimes. Everybody struggled during the pandemic and still struggles now with these challenges of working and being a parent and facing threats and trying to find time, and a lot of kind of baggage that we carry from our childhoods. And that's why I'm here, I suppose, as a psychologist, to talk about this, because I suppose that's my area of expertise, working with kids and families. So Brian, I talk a lot about the 3 pillars of good enough parenting, and I actually wrote an article about it for the Irish Independent, and that's another one that I can share. And the 3 pillars that I would have named were the learning to trust your gut instinct, and we can talk about that again in a few minutes, letting go of the fallacy of perfection, getting to know yourself as a parent, and prioritizing self-care. And we'll talk about that again. So this is one of the most important slides. If you ask me as a parent or as a worker, like, why do I need to mind myself? Like, why? And I'll kind of say, well, if you're at home with your kids, or even if you're in a situation with like a difficult coworker or boss or an employee or whatever it is, when their storm, so when the storm of another person meets our calm, when we're calm, but they're stormy, co-regulation occurs. It's this kind of like a storm, calm, and suddenly you're co-regulated. And it's kind of like, I've given this example many times. My daughter's in the shower. She hates having the shower. She screams, she shouts, she used to. And there's no point in me meeting her up here and starting to kind of get angry with her or anything else. I think sometimes the best thing you can do is say nothing and just breathe and just kind of calm yourself down. That's why my book is called Love In, Love Out. so that then you're co-regulating the other person. And then suddenly she becomes that bit calmer. I find an entrance, and then I can distract her away from how she's feeling. So that's what we do with our children all the time. But how can we do that if we don't fill our own cups? You can't co-regulate if you haven't filled your cup. How can you react calmly to your boss, say, if you haven't had lunch? Like, we have to think of what our basic needs are as well. So before you act, and on that note, I always use, and I know Brian Penny uses this as well, are you hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? And if you are any of those, and hangry is the worst, because that's like anger from the pit of your stomach. I don't know if you felt that, Brian. I'm sure you have.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it's, I think sometimes like psychologists try to get real complicated with things and go, oh, let's think about the deep reasons for this. But sometimes it's as simple as your child or you are hungry, angry, lonely, tired. And there's no point in having the conversation now when your rational brain is not working. We don't work rationally when we're any of those. We need to like kind of look after our needs and then re-engage with the situation. So these are a couple of quotes that are a couple of ideas. I suppose I would say as a parent, there's a huge value if you're a parent and you become a parent in working on yourself. And I know that like I suppose I wrote in my book that becoming a parent kind of made me realize I had a lot more skeletons in my closet than I realized. I had dealt with a lot of stuff before through counseling, but I had a lot more skeletons in there. And I kind of, even though it was difficult at times, I saw it as an opportunity for me to learn more about what are my trigger points. And Viktor Frankl has a beautiful quote that says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. So it's this whole idea of, if you are able to feed that green soothing circle with, self-care, then you're able to increase the space between stimulus and response. You're able to meet the storm with calm, or better able to. And then that's in your response. We have many different responses we can make to to one given situation. So we're much more likely to choose a calmer, more healthy response if we've actually, filled our cups, so to speak. And then there's this idea of shark music, which is like, I talk about it in the course. It's like the echoes of our childhood wounds, which make us have trigger points towards our children that may have come from the way we were parented. And it comes from this circle of security parenting course that I have taught before. So I saw this graphic actually on Instagram the other day, and I really liked it, from Tommy Siegel. So two parents walking a baby, and it's like, you need to go to therapy. You first. Why do I get the feeling I'll be first? Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of, I liked that, because it was like, if we deny the fact that we have issues, and I'm not saying everybody needs to go to therapy, because they don't, and therapy isn't for everybody. There are different ways of managing and becoming more aware of your trigger points and how you react, and there's many different ways. But I suppose this is kind of showing that if you deny self-awareness, then you deny your child of your self-awareness and what they could benefit from your self-awareness. The greatest gift you can give your child, I believe, is to be aware of your vulnerabilities and of your trigger points. That's really, I suppose, what I believe. The capacity for self-soothing, so the capacity for building our soothing circles, is born out of hundreds and hundreds of instances of being soothed by someone else. So if that was an issue for you as a child, it's going to be an issue for you as a grown-up. And that is what I talk about with clients all the time. Sometimes they say, I can't even draw my soothing circle, it's so small, because they don't have the model for it when they were growing up. But we can always develop and like learn how to do that for ourselves. So you can't pour from an empty cup. Take care of yourself. Self-care is a priority and necessity, not a luxury, in the work that we do as working parents. And it means giving the best of you instead of what's left of you. Because I find sometimes at the end of the day, there's only a bit of what's left of me. And if I haven't filled my cup even a little bit, I'm not actually as able for that 9 p.m., spanner that gets thrown in the works when you've kids, as you know. or in your case, it's probably 3 a.m. spanner, Brian.
3, 4, 5.
Oh God. Oh God. So what does self-care look like? And we're going to finish now. It's about nurturing all your roles, achieving balance. It's about soothing ourselves, counterbalancing the threat response, restoring balance in all these areas of your life: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, social, and then those 3 elements of self-compassion. I like this quote, and I wrote an article about it a few months ago in the Irish Independent. True self-care is not salt baths and chocolate cake. It is making the choice to build a life you don't need to regularly escape from. And I suppose I was talking about self-care, I suppose, in the sense that it's not just because, it's not just like a luxury. It's about facing our problems head on instead of avoiding away from them. It's about refilling our cup, creating that crucial space between stimulus and response so we can make calm and sometimes difficult decisions to create lives we don't need to escape from. And then I suppose the impact of compassion, if you start practicing this for yourself, the impact of it with your children, in your workplace, with your friends, with your family, in all aspects of your life will be huge. And it doesn't need to be a massive thing. It can be small little breaths throughout your day that you incorporate, that you become more aware of how you are in any given moment. And in the course, Brian, I have this Lotus of Self-Care exercise that I kind of ask parents, how do they feel in each of these areas of their lives, and trying to set self-care intentions and what they might need to help them to set those intentions. And I love the idea of the lotus, and I actually got a tattoo of the lotus. I don't know if you can see it, a few months ago. No mud, no lotus. We're all lotuses. We all have mud underneath that, kind of stuff that has gone on in our previous lives. But I truly believe that's where the wisdom and the beauty comes from. And then these are just ideas for compassionate self-care for parents: filling our cup, embracing daily practices like regular practices, balancing enjoyment, achievement, and connection every day. That's another article I can share with you. It's from Psychology Tools. It's all about like the basics of kind of well-being, work-life balance, boundaries, being a steward of your senses. I think that's so important. The last 2 years, I've had to stop sometimes watching the news or kind of looking at social media when I feel kind of not really grounded in myself, and to just kind of decide to switch off and put on Gogglebox instead, or go for a walk or play with the kids, because knowing that it's not serving me in that moment, because we are stewards of our senses. Aligning values with what you do, striving for good enough, living a life you don't need to check out of, committing to yourself, seeing it through, and asking yourself, what do I need in this moment right now? Like if you're feeling really overwhelmed, like I listened to this great podcast Brezzi did with a neuroscientist that said, take 2 deep breaths in through your nose. So I'm just going to do them right now. So big deep breath in through your nose. And another big deep breath in through your nose. Pause, and a big breath out through your mouth. Doing that several times if you're feeling overwhelmed, getting up out of your chair, if you're sitting in a chair. I know, Brian, you're standing up, looking out at the horizon, using your visual sense to look out and see that there's a world out there that isn't just inside your head. That's what we need in these moments to help us. So I'm talking about daily practices, but I'm also talking about what do you do in a really tough moment. And I love this: follow your bliss, do what you love, do what makes your heart sing. If you know there's something that makes your heart sing and you're not doing it, please, like try to bring some of that into your life. For me, laughter, creativity, things like that make my heart sing. Playing with the kids, acting silly, making slime, going and watching that movie Sing over the last few days. I've loved it. It's so good. So just doing things that make you just forget and bring you back to your childhood self, your fun childhood self. And that's it. I just finally, Brian, this is the course that I do on your site, Workwell Institute. I go into all of these ideas broken down in more detail. I have some mini quizzes, some exercises, loads of links to podcasts, things like that. But we obviously can share some of the links today. Anything that I think is relevant, we can share that with people. And just thank you so much for listening. And I'm looking forward to having a chat with you, Brian. So I'm going to stop sharing now.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Malie.
Cool.
Yeah, we'll share links. We'll include the link to the course for anyone that is enjoying this and wants to dive deeper. We can include the link to the course as well. Listen, that was class, Malie. Thanks so much for that.
No bother.
Can I? Well, if anyone has questions, by the way, just pop them in the comment section of whatever platform you're using, and we should be able to see them come through here. Am I right in saying, so the idea of self-care, I mean, going back a number of years, I think the whole idea was, or at least the perception was, that you sacrifice yourself for your children, and you didn't matter at all. It was children 100%, and obviously children are incredibly important, but it was this idea that you would sacrifice yourself, your health, your free time, your sleep, whatever it might be. So the idea of self-care, what you're promoting, is just looking after number one first, isn't it? So that you can kind of do a much better job in looking after your children and being there for your children.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think maybe if we look back at 50 years ago, I think kids were kind of running more freely, and maybe parents were less focused on them 50 years ago. And then suddenly, I think the next generation reacted to that and kind of went real kind of overprotective on kids and trying to do everything for kids until, I heard this really good quote by a psychiatrist once who said, we overparent our under 10-year-olds and we underparent our over 10-year-olds. So it's almost like they turn 10 or they turn into teenagers. They tell us to F off or whatever. They don't want us in their bedrooms anymore. That's all ahead of us, Brian. And then we kind of just let them at it on their screens. And that's not okay either. It's kind of like we have to find a balance. And I suppose, yes, when children are very young, as you know, you have a baby, we do kind of, this stuff might seem more difficult when you've just had a baby, because obviously their physical needs are so huge that you do need to be there kind of at their beck and call, because their needs are so big. But I think sometimes the buy-in for parents, it's like, I kind of said, I was lecturing last week in NUIG, and I just said, as psychologists, we have to sell our ideas. And we have to get a buy-in from our clients for these ideas. So say if I was to say to a teenager who's really into like working on their leaving cert, say, oh, you need to like engage in some more self-care. Like you love going to the gym, make sure you keep doing that while you're studying for your leaving cert. And she'd probably be like, no, well, I don't want to do that. That takes away from my studying. But I then explained the 3 circles to her and said, well, if you want to actually do better and have healthy drive and do better at your leaving cert, it is a good idea for you to go to the gym and do these good things for yourself, because you will be better. You will be more relaxed. You will bring your better self to your study. And similarly for parents who might kind of go, oh, I can't do anything for myself. And usually that comes from some type of childhood difficulty, maybe where they haven't had models of soothing, or they didn't see their parents soothe themselves or do anything for themselves. They might have seen their mother, for instance, completely devote themselves to the job of parenting and not do anything for themselves, or their father. And I guess they might think, well, how do I even do this, and why is it important? So in terms of the buy-in for them, I'd say, look, if you can't do it for yourself, you need to do it for your children, because if you don't fill your cup, you are not going to react in a calm way to them when they have that freak out at 9 o'clock at night or whenever. So, but most importantly, I would hope that people become self-aware enough that if they find it difficult to do it for themselves, they try to figure out why that is. What is their barrier? I do talk about barriers to self-care as well. What is their barrier? And how can they address that barrier so that they can actually start to do this for themselves and try to find who they were. I mean, Brian, we were all people before we became parents, right? Do you know what I mean? We don't just lose that.
Sure, yeah. So are we reaching hopefully reaching a more of a balance then. So it's not the neglecting, we're not over parenting, we're trying to reach a balance between that and then the self-care part as well. And is it your hope that we'll kind of stabilize or something, or will he reach that happy place and we won't see another shift, I guess, in that in the coming
I think we're
years?
going to see forever more, reactions and things. I think one thing that we do, like very often when parents come into me and they say, oh, I'm always feeling guilty, I'm constantly like, not putting boundaries on my child's behavior because they feel guilty about something. I feel guilty because I'm not at home enough, so I just let them away with everything. Or I feel, and we all do it to an extent. Generally we tend to react to situations, and what's important for me as a psychologist is to try to figure out what is going on for them underneath it. But yeah, I think it helps to know that resilience for children and for grown-ups is that it's about facing a manageable threat with a soothing presence by our side. So it's about, like, arguably you could say COVID was a manageable threat for many of us, particularly, like, say, for us who maybe were hit, but maybe we didn't lose anyone during COVID, but we had difficulty, but that, wasn't a great, major, huge impact. But for some, it has been, obviously. Yeah. But for most, you could say it was a manageable threat. And if you had a parent or a stable caregiver there to help you through in a good enough way, and what I mean by good enough is not that you don't make mistakes, because I've lost my cool with my kids, as in shouted at them and then felt really guilty about it. And it's about good enough. So it's about a third of the time you're tuning into each other. A third of the time you have a rupture where you don't quite understand each other. They might get annoyed, you might get annoyed. And then a third of the time is this beauty of repair where you go back to your child. Like last night, for instance, my daughter says to me, oh, you're finally ready to sit down and watch Dancing with the Stars, right? We had it recorded. And I was like, I was just like, do you know what I've been doing for the last half an hour? I have been, like, getting rid of your clothes, getting your clothes ready for tomorrow, getting your food ready, filling your hot water bottle, doing this, doing that. And I just reacted. And then it was kind of like, then she got upset. Then I was like, oh God, but then what I needed to do is just say, I'm sorry, Jess, I'm sorry. And not I'm sorry, but you shouldn't have said that, because a sorry is not a sorry if there's a but in it. It just isn't.
Right.
So just saying, I'm sorry, Jess, I overreacted. Yeah. And that was it. Just, I'm sorry. We just have to stop saying, but I'm sorry. And then she was like, it's okay, mommy. And then when she was ready, she put her arm on me again, and it was fine.
Very good. So is that you mentioned during the presentation that one of the strengths, I think you mentioned, and one of the greatest gifts you could give is showing your children that you are aware of your vulnerabilities. So is that one of those instances there?
Yeah,
you're just saying sorry. You're not afraid to say sorry that you were wrong. Like we've probably all been, or some of us would know, where parents are always right, kids are always wrong. That old attitude, anyway, an older attitude. Whereas you're showing you're vulnerable. You're not perfect. You make mistakes.
I think it's so important. Like, it's so important, but it's so hard to do if it wasn't done with us, And I do think the older generation, like the idea of saying sorry, it's almost like you lose face if you say sorry. But, saying sorry is so important because it teaches your child that when stuff goes down and when there's a rupture, then you can repair it. And it means that she is going to look for friendships and relationships as she gets older, where sorry is part of the equation. Sorry is something that we do. And that's why even if you have a row with your partner and your child or your wife or whatever, and your child is there, let them know that you guys have made up, that you're okay again. So it's like, we can have these storms, but we can say sorry and get over them. And yes, sometimes our children there's a learning moment. So my learning moment from last night might be, why did I get to the point of, kind of losing my cool with her? My learning moment might be that maybe I should get them to help me more, that maybe, like, before we sit down to watch Dancing with the Stars, that they would have helped me do a few bits and pieces, and then we can all sit down together. So that could be the learning moment that I need to take that on as a parent, and knowing that maybe I hadn't filled my cup enough by the stage that happened. Do you know?
Very good. Yeah. I was going to talk about, you mentioned the core values exercise, or the core values first of all, and that there's an exercise for that in the course. But Julie is actually asking, any recommended tools? Do you use tools to clarify those values in any way?
I suppose I have the exercise from the course. It's not kind of online I don't know, is it possible to share it? But like, I don't mind. It comes from Mind Tools. It's adapted from Mind Tools. And I have, I have it as a kind of like a PDF document, but I'm not sure if you're able to share something like that, Brian.
What does maybe even the process look like?
The process?
Brian Penny talks about this as well, actually. This is something he speaks about, understanding your values first.
Yeah, I suppose you kind of choose. So these are exercises. This is an exercise I do with my clients sometimes, where you choose the moments you were most proud in your life. So you're asked to imagine and think about, what were the moments that were in which you felt most proud? Like, who were you with? How did you feel? What did that kind of look like for you? And why were you? In what way did you feel proud, or why did you feel proud? And then the next part is you choose the moments in which you felt most fulfilled in your life. Why did you, in what way did you feel fulfilled? Who were you with? I'm just trying to get the exercise, actually, Brian, if you don't mind, because there's a third part of it that has just literally escaped me. But I have it.
If you can't find it there, I can share some detail in the minute. Yeah. Oh, great.
And then identify the times when you were happiest. Find examples from both your career and personal life to ensure balance in your answers. What were you doing? Were you with other people? What other factors contributed? Identify times you felt most proud. Identify the times you felt most fulfilled. So you kind of start with that, and you have a real think about those kinds of things. And then I have like a list that I got off online of like, I think, I don't know, maybe like 50 values. And then I get people to choose what are their top 10 values based on their kind of answers and their reflections from what they've just done. And then I ask them to prioritize what their top 3 values are. It can be hard to prioritize your top 3 values, because like I could do my top 5, but I couldn't really do top 3. Like for me, it was like family, compassion, because I felt compassion kind of really captured loads of things that meant a lot to me. Creativity, that's one thing I kind of hadn't realized was a value. And our values can change, by the way, throughout our lives.
And can I ask, is there, because I guess probably all parents tuning in to today, there's probably no one who wouldn't on the call who wouldn't choose family as one of their top values. I guess you need to kind of dive a little bit deeper then, do you? But maybe this is all part of the exercise. I'm guessing family health will almost always be in the, or am I wrong?
It might be, but somebody might think, actually, one of mine was like, okay, family might be there, and relationships for people, do you know? But spirituality could be, for me, that's a new one that I wouldn't have really thought about before. But I kind of feel like I've been in my head for so long, and I feel like now I'm 46 in a few weeks, and I'm like, I really want to tap into the more spirit. That's why I kind of talk about angel cards and things like that. I've done a few Facebook lives and that on stuff like that, because I just feel like that's important to me. So there are things like honesty. Somebody might say to you, no, honesty, that's like absolutely my number one thing. Do you know what I mean? Or self-respect, service to other people, responsibility, humor, growth, like fairness, community, adventure, achievement. Somebody might say, oh, adventure is definitely number one now, because I have sat in Ireland for 2 years and I want to get away. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, that's why it's important to kind of keep figuring out what your values are, and then trying to align what you do every day in your life a little bit with your values. I think it's really important.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it makes sense spending time on it and kind of digging quite deep into it, rather than just the word. There is more to it, but it sounds like a very worthwhile exercise. a question from Sophie. Thanks, Sophie. I'm just wondering, she's asking, Malie, could you elaborate a little on how you share your trigger points with your children? I know you probably touched on this a little earlier, but Sophie just asking if you could elaborate on that.
Yeah. The way I would share it is I might say, sorry, I shouted at you earlier, darling. Mummy was feeling a bit stressed. Mummy has... I'll always call myself Mummy. Mummy, Mummy's been working hard today, and I didn't go for my walk because it was raining, and I know that I probably, it would be good. I would feel calmer if I had gone for my walk or something like that. But now I'm okay again, and I realize that. So it's like you have precious opportunities as a parent to, when you repair, to actually let them know. And you don't always, like, sometimes sorry is enough, and you don't have to give a big kind of explanation about why you reacted in the way you did. But if you feel your child is old enough and there could be a learning moment out of it, and letting them know, oh, sorry, Mummy just kind of lost herself there. Apologies that I shouted at you. Shouldn't have done that. And then if you want to explain, then do explain, but obviously we kind of have to veer on the side of not going in depth into our childhood traumas with our children, because that might traumatize them. We don't want them to become upset. Or else, kind of, if you've never said sorry in your family so far, you can use it as an opportunity to kind of say, I've realized that, I listened to a webinar today, and they were talking about saying sorry. And I've realized that maybe I'm not so great at saying sorry, or when I say sorry, I always use a but. And I kind of want to change that. And I'm realizing that maybe it's because in my family, we didn't really say sorry much. And I think it's important, So those are, you can kind of just casually use things like that.
Sure. And you, again, on the subject of that vulnerability that you mentioned, and being the importance of showing that you can be aware of your own vulnerabilities, how do you balance that, or do you balance that with, we often hear as well about the importance of a strong, let's say for boys or girls, a strong female role model, a strong male role model. How do you balance that? That's the strong role models in the family, mom or dad or both, with the vulnerability piece?
Yes, I've never been asked that. That's a really good question. Are you sure you're not a psychologist, Brian? How do you balance that?
Or do you balance, I suppose?
You show different sides at different moments. Okay. When a no is a no, like when your kids are asking you, Mom, please, can we watch another YouTube clip before bed, and it's too late? I'm sorry, but a no is a no. Yeah. And it has to be a no. If you have problems saying no, I would encourage you to kind of look at why that might be. I think, it's a hard one. I do think as your kids get older, you can still be that person, that the parent that is able to guide them and say no when you need to say no, but yet also show a vulnerability. I don't think a vulnerability is weakness. I think vulnerability is a strength in a way. It's showing your child that perfection, as we talk about the 3 pillars of good enough parenting, one of them is the fallacy of perfection. And if we kind of try to act all, like we know it all and we never make mistakes, then what are they going to learn about being a human being? Nothing, because we all make mistakes and we all mess up. My kids are like, God, Mommy, can you, like, they do kind of make fun of me sometimes and kind of go, Mike, we just kind of make jokes, like, because I guess maybe I show vulnerabilities a lot. You have to know what's comfortable for you as a parent, but don't think that showing vulnerability or saying sorry means you're not a strong parent, because you can find a way, but it might just be your own way, and it might take some practice.
Sure. Yeah. Excellent. Annette just saying there, her value would be health, and if she's not in good health, she won't be there for her kids. That'd definitely be one of my core values, I would say. Just, I guess, to try and figure that out with young kids, you got to get maybe the exercise done early, kind of thing. You got to work around all that, but it's prioritizing it is key. I mean, if I didn't prioritize it, it wouldn't happen. Something else would get in the way. So that's how that works.
And so being aware of that, does that help you, Brian, to keep good, to kind of have more healthy practices in your life?
Oh, absolutely it does. Yeah. And I feel it, I see it already with my daughter then as well. Like she being healthy or being active is just normal to her now. And, I'm not forcing her to do anything, but she likes trying to do her yoga or something, or just being active and getting out. It's just a part of her day to be active. It's kind of normal.
Isn't that
So
incredible?
it's great. Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. She loves watching Netflix and stuff as well and
Ah,
all that and
yeah.
being lazy. But
Yeah.
she has her kind of gym clothes or park kid clothes, as she calls them, as well as her other clothes, and she likes to do her activities as well. But yeah, I mean, I kind of have to prioritize the gym time or the workout time, like a meeting. It's early and very early in the morning. Try and get it done before
Really?
others get up. Still, that's getting
Wow.
harder and harder, but it's still in there, and because it just wouldn't happen if I let it go into the evening time or into the day.
Yeah.
So it's a question that's a value then, definitely, without doubt.
Yeah, it's kind of like an unquestionable thing that you need to do to feel well for the day, probably.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Getting onto the practical side of the things, so I'm sure everyone tuning in is probably either on their way back into the workplace, or it's certainly being spoken about in the hybrid working model. What will that look like? We had this Coleman Noctor, who of course well, was on the podcast, and I don't know if he coined it or what. He certainly said it on the podcast that
Oh, yeah.
we're not working from home at the moment. We're parenting from work
Yeah, that
during the
was
height
so
of the
good.
Yeah, it's a good line, isn't it? So I guess what I'm getting at is, are we going to be parenting from hybrid work now, or what will that look like? Any kind of advice for parents, as they've probably been at home for full time now for 2 years and been enjoying that and getting used to that, and all of a sudden now we have another change coming. And any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, I think, we've been in this for 2 years. We can say 2 years now, can't we? So there are coping tools that you have used for the last 2 years. I mean, March, was it 12th, the Thursday, collected the kids from school, and suddenly it was like everybody was at home, the kids were at home. I mean, they stayed at home until September. We have gone through so much and so many changes, lockdown, and then we thought we were out of it, and then we came back, then we were another lockdown, and then we thought we were better over last summer because we had the vaccines. We thought we were out of it, and then suddenly we're not out of it again, and then we kind of are now, but it's different. And it's like, I think we need to pat ourselves on the back first and foremost for having adapted as human beings to such a ever-changing situation. I really do. I think, before we even think of what next, let's think of thinking about what coping tools you've already used. How have you managed already? Even writing them down can help you to figure out how you're going to manage the next changes that are there. And I think, most kids are in school now. Obviously, if you've got very young kids, you mightn't have them in a creche or a school situation. But I think what people have learned over the last few years is that boundaries became really important, and kind of, time boundaries of, I need to, switch off my work phone. I've said to my husband at times, can you just take my work phone away from me? Hide it. Because otherwise I'll check it at the weekend, because I just, and then that could be a complete disaster to do that. So I think boundaries are, we've learned that boundaries are really important, that sometimes we might need, say, when we're collecting our kids from school, we might need to go for a walk or do something between work and doing that, or we might need to let our kids know, okay, I'm in work mode at the moment, so therefore you do that for a while and I'm working. It's about juggling, trying to figure out, finding time to do things. I know many people some people feel anxious about going back to their work offices, and that can be hard. And I think, if you are feeling very anxious about going back on a full-time basis, I think it's trying to unpack, what is it that you're anxious about exactly about that situation, because anxiety can present as this big mess in our heads, and it's about trying to unpack what aspect of it are we most anxious about, and then trying to figure out how we're going to manage that, be it talk to our boss or somebody we trust in work about how to manage that and how that's going to work in your life. I think we've realized that a hybrid working model is preferable, as in people having some level of choice about how they work, because, you know, commuting every day isn't necessarily, you know, the best option either. But then some people are dying to get back into an office because they can more easily separate work from home, and they like having the conversations with people, which we weren't having when we were at home all the time. So really trying to figure out what is going to work best for you and how to manage that.
Yeah, great advice.
What do you think, Brian?
Great advice. I was going to add that most employers that I've been working with are being very open about this as well, and flexible and understanding, and they're dipping their toe in the water. They're allowing colleagues to come back slowly at their own pace, maybe one day a week, to trial that out. Because people are anxious, as you mentioned, about one, going back on public transport, maybe two, going back into the workplace, into the work environment, having been out of that for 2 years. So for employers, I would encourage them to continue that. And if they're not doing that, I would encourage them to start doing that. Just engage with your colleagues, to listen to their needs and wants, and just open those communication channels. And if you're not getting that from your employer, I mean, ask the questions. Ask the question of your manager. You know, what's it going to look like when we go back? What are the options when we go back, and how flexible can we be? And just understand, as you said, understand your own needs and wants then as well. Like, what are our childcare considerations as well, because that's going to be something important to consider. So it's going to be interesting. I think we're not going to, things won't settle down for a full year anyway, I would say close to a year, because we're really just dipping toe in the water at the moment. Even people that are saying they want to be fully remote, or 2 days in, 3 days at home, I don't think until they actually start doing that, I don't think they're really going to know. So they're going to need a period of bedding down to figure out what works and what doesn't. So a trial period for the next period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, COVID hasn't gone away.
No.
So we're still, you know, trying to keep our relatives safe, and trying to keep our children safe, and all of that. So it's kind of like now suddenly we're being told, oh, life has gone back to normal, but yet the threat is still there. But our brains are still attuned to the threat. So to expect us overnight, oh, just because the government said you can just, and I think that's why we need to be really kind and understanding and compassionate towards other people who aren't ready yet to have the play dates, or to meet up, or to go for dinner, or to do all the things that we were doing before. There's no rush, guys. You know, the world hopefully will be open for, you know, for a lot longer now. And it's all about kind of taking your time and being patient with other people.
Absolutely. Well said. Yeah, because everyone is just feeling a little bit different about it. It was a nice and positive shock when things were opened up again, but I don't think people were actually really expecting it. So, and everyone is kind of treating it a little bit differently. So yeah, very well said.
And also, just to say, the brain is still expecting the next lockdown. Do you know what I mean?
That's true.
Like, how many have we had? So the brain is still expecting, oh, we're going to have the Taoiseach talking to us again about another lockdown. So like, you can't just expect people to just be okay, you know?
Yeah. Time flies when you're having fun. If there's any final questions, just pop them in the comment section there. We've got one from Grania here, Malie, just asking about any tips on building initiative in her kids. She's fast becoming a nag with her twin boys. I guess she's talking. This is when we were kind of talking about, I think, getting out, getting active, just doing something like that. Any advice in that regard?
I think just to go back to behavioral psychology, which is kind of like, what is the best reward for them? If their best reward is a video game, or whatever it is their best reward is, they get that if they do. So if they do A, then they can get B. It's just
is it as simple as that? Is it?
Kind of is. It's like, girls, if you put away the socks for me, you can go on your YouTube. They will do it so fast and so well. I swear to God. Or if you go for a walk with me first, then you can blah, blah, blah. It's like trying to figure out what is the reward for your child and working it that way. Or sometimes it can be like, with my daughter, trying to get her to eat different foods. It's like she has a bead jar, and it's like, okay, you'll get 5 beads for every new food you try. If you get 50 beads, we bring you to Smith's and you can buy something to the level of €30. Right.
Wow. That's intricate. That's been really planned out, that one.
Kids love that kind of stuff.
They do, and I kind of like, I definitely get that for maybe the shorter term stuff.
Yeah.
Is there a way to like this? I know it's an
Long-term
impossible thing.
initiative.
Well, just to kind of get them to, maybe what Grania is getting at is there a way to get them to enjoy something and to want to go to something off their own bat without having that reward system in place?
Yeah, I mean,
Is
I
that
suppose
just a natural occurrence?
I'm just thinking if they're 10-year-old twin boys, they're probably encouraged to do the same thing because they're both 10 years old. And it could be that they're very different. I'm just imagining here. If I read this on a referral, I'd be going, okay, they're probably quite different. So trying to figure out what makes each of their hearts sing. And if you have the time, trying to figure out what is it for each of them that might motivate them a bit more, So it could be that one of them really likes going for a walk and the other one doesn't. So how do you, but the other one likes doing some other thing. So it's like trying to figure out, maybe treating them as a unit, it mightn't encourage their own initiative. I am totally bringing this out of nowhere, but I'm just trying to use
that's interesting.
my, it mightn't be too much. It mightn't be right,
Exactly, yeah. Well, Annette just saying there that she thought she used the bribe too much, but it's useful to just for this, maybe the smaller initiatives, or to
but I think if they see you, as Brian, you said, like your daughter sees you getting so much out of physical exercise, and then she wants to do it. So it's like, it's about us modeling, even saying, God, I feel great after a walk. Do you know? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. The role modeling, isn't it? Over time, consistent over time. Yeah. We're almost out of time. I don't want people, you touched on the hungry, angry, lonely, tired, and the hangry. We're coming up on lunchtime, so we'll give people their lunchtime back. We touched briefly on the Stressed documentary. I think I first came across you on that. It was a few years ago now, but it's an excellent documentary. Just tell us very briefly about that one, if you could, Malie.
Yeah, I worked with a volunteer or somebody on the program. His name was Jonathan, and it's okay for me to use his name because he was on the program. And he was toxically stressed, I suppose we could say. He was working 2 jobs, and really, like, his, in his mind, it was kind of like, when I make so much money, then I'll be happy, and then I can spend time with my family. So when I reach that, then I can kind of, and then his, do the things I really want to do. And so he was working himself. They put a heart monitor on him. They realized that he had high levels of stress, and stress really affects you in very kind of physical and mental ways. And so what I was asked to do was to help him with his stress. And I thought, oh God, like, how am I going to, I bought this like stress and relaxation workbook, and I was like, okay, I'll do all these exercises with him and that. And then I found out about compassion focused therapy, about the 3 circles and the whole model of looking at trying to naturally build up his soothing system and trying to figure out why he had this in his mind about, when this happens, then I'll be like this. And it came from, I suppose, a feeling growing up that, I suppose, maybe not feeling good enough in ways and wanting to prove himself. But when he realized that his values were very much about family, and, I suppose autonomy in a way, he was then able to kind of incorporate, and we were able to kind of work together on trying to build his soothing circle so that he would be able to more readily able to switch off his phone at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock and still be driven. He was afraid he'd become lazy, but he didn't. Still be driven, but be able to then switch off, because he felt he was missing out on really important moments with his family. And that was leading to, not feeling good at all.
It's a really worthwhile documentary, and I just had a quick look there. It's on the RTE player at the moment, so I will include the link in the resources that go out with this after this session. And actually, our mutual friend, and he was a previous guest on the Work Well webinar, Chris Flack, is in that, or certainly Unplug. His company are in that documentary. They were working with HubSpot.
Oh, brilliant!
So I will include the link to that in the. So a lot of the attendees will get great value from that. And another link that we will include is for anyone, again, that wants to dive deeper, wants to kind of work, see Malie in action a little bit more and get all the core value exercises. Check out the online course that Malie has, she's put an excellent program together, really has, on the Workwell Institute. So go to that site, workwellinstitute.org. You'll find the Compassionate Self-Care for Working Parents online course there. I'll include the link in the email that goes out as well. Malie, and just before we finish, thanks to everyone. I can see our lovely messages coming through. Thanks to everybody. The really important question that I think every parent wants to know now is Sing 2 any good, and should we be bringing the kids to it?
Oh my God, it's so good.
Is it?
Yeah, we went to my husband had a birthday last week, and we collected the kids a little bit early from school, which they loved, even just for half an hour, even though we didn't have to, we just did it.
Right.
I know I'm not recommending you do this now, but it can be a nice little treat. And then we brought them to Salt Hill, where we live near in Galway, and they have these recliner seats, which is brilliant, because I usually just go there and fall asleep and the kids watch a movie. But on this occasion, I did not fall asleep. It was absolutely brilliant. Great music, great kind of, just a great break away from the seriousness of life, which we all need. It rocks, and Bono is in it, absolutely, and he does a great job in it. And the music is fab. It made me laugh. It made me cry. I want to see it again.
Brilliant.
And I have nothing to do with the making of it, by the way. I'm not,
I remember I brought my daughter to see, when she was very young, to see Sing 1.
Oh, did you?
I thought it was just okay. It was good. It was fine. But I have heard great things about Sing 2, and Grania is really recommending it there too. So definitely have to go make an effort to see that. Brilliant. Well, listen, Malie, thanks so much. We'll include all your links and your details in the email that goes out. Thanks so much to everyone for tuning in and for joining. Really appreciate it so much. We'll have another webinar actually in 2 weeks with Patrick McKeown of the Oxygen Advantage. So stay tuned for that. Keep your eyes peeled for that. Malie, listen, thanks so much. We really appreciate your time. Really enjoyed that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Cheers.